The State of Real Estate with your host, Gerry Lantain.
Hello and welcome to this episode. Today we're going to be talking with a lawyer about real estate and contracts, etc., etc. First, we're going to get to the market report. Today's market report is going to cover the statistics from May 2020, comparing them to the May of 2021 that has just passed. And, of course, these statistics are brought to you by the Lakeland Association of Realtors. The average price in Muskoka from May to last May has gone up by 7.2%. It's not huge, but in comparison with everything what's happening, it shows you how the market has gone up. New listings are up over last May by 12.9%, but then last May we had just come to terms with COVID, and so who knows what was really happening. Homes for sale. The total inventory for sale this May is actually 38.8% lower than last May. So that's kind of strange. Not sure why that stat is like that. Now, the actual sales from last May to this May are up by a whopping 70%. But again, last year at this time, we were kind of, if I recall correctly, in May, we were kind of in full lockdown and people weren't really going out and doing much at the time. So the average days on the market for a home last May was 49 days and this May is 23 days. So it's almost, well, actually more than half the amount of time, 53.1% less days on the market. So things are moving quick. When they're coming on the market right now this year, they're going really, really fast. So on average, the percentage of the original asking price, I do believe it's about 10.2% up. I wrote down on my little chart, but I know it's up, and people are getting just a little bit over asking right now. So the market has cooled off a little bit in the last couple of weeks compared to how frenzy it was during February, March, and April, but it is still a buyer's market out there, so it's a little tough if you're the buyer, but it's going to be a little bit easier as more inventory comes on the market as we stretch into the summer months. That's the market report. All right, welcome back to the show. This is The State of Real Estate, and we are going to be speaking with lawyer Christopher Watson today about real estate and law in real estate. Chris, would you mind giving the people your information, how they can get a hold of you, and that kind of stuff, your full legal name and your company name?
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Gerry. Yeah, it's Christopher B. Watson. I've been practicing in Huntsville for over 8 years now. Before that, I was in Toronto, practicing down in Toronto, and I was happy to be back here, and I've gotten into doing quite a bit of real estate law now.
Excellent.
I have an office on Main Street, 106 Main Street East, Unit 2, and you can reach me by phone, 705-787-9317, or on email, chris@watsonlawyers.ca.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. Before we get going, you wanted to make a disclaimer?
Right. Yeah, I should just mention, Gerry, we're having a conversation, and it's not. I'm not providing legal advice. I'm giving you some information, and if viewers do want legal advice, they should retain a lawyer and get proper legal advice.
Yeah. So we won't misconstrue this as true legal advice. I'm just going to be asking you a bunch of questions that I want to know about. So, first off and foremost, when it comes to contract negotiation, the lawyer usually is not involved. Is that true?
Correct. I mean, you're a realtor, and usually by the time the deal comes to me, it's already been negotiated.
Okay.
So we're dealing with the deal that we get.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes there are clauses, I've seen them a number of times, called lawyer approval. Why and what would that entail on your behalf?
Right. So I think if there is an inkling that's an issue, as you as a realtor think there could be a problem with a file, if it's a legal description problem, something particular with the property, maybe zoning, and you may want the lawyer to have, say, 5 days to review and make sure that there aren't real issues.
Perfect. Okay. Now, there are two sides to the lawyer. There's the buying lawyer and there's a selling lawyer. Right. Let's start with buying. What is the lawyer's role? I mean, I don't know if that's too loose of a question.
Well, I could just kind of run through what happens when we get a file. So usually the agreement of purchase and sale is sent over to us. We will open a file, get the client's information, send them a letter. That's the first thing I do. I want to send a letter to the lawyer, to the client. Mm-hmm. Tell them, what's involved in purchasing property in Ontario. Okay. The searches that I do, some of the searches I don't do or that I could do. Sometimes building and zoning compliance searches are important.
Yep.
Next thing is to do a search. I do a full title search because I want to know, that the client, I want to know what property the client is purchasing and make sure there are no issues with the legal description, that there aren't liens that are registered that shouldn't be. It's not subject to some spousal rights or debts.
Okay.
And make sure that the boundary description's good and that they've got legal access. That's key up here in Muskoka.
How do you mean by that, if you don't mind?
Sure.
Legal
so
access.
you've got the best access you can get is municipal access. So you front on a municipal road.
Okay.
You're never going to have an issue.
Yep.
The second best is having a deeded right-of-way. So you're going across private lands, but you want to make sure that there's a right-of-way that says, I have the right to travel over, along, and upon this tract of land for foot and vehicular traffic to access my property.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because that brings up a question I was going to ask later on, but the importance of actually using a local lawyer.
Yeah.
As opposed to, if you're buying property up here in the Muskokas and you have a lawyer from the city, they might not be as experienced in the things that we run into.
True, Gerry. And nothing against Toronto lawyers, but by and large, they're dealing with plans of subdivision. When you have a plan of subdivision, you've got Planning Act, Planning Act issues, compliance, and you've got access because you've got a municipal road that's been dedicated as a public road, and it's assumed by the municipality. Okay. So up here, we get into issues with access. I just had a file today where there were some access issues. We were able to resolve them with title insurance. And
excellent.
I'm probably going to talk about title insurance later.
On. Yeah, the
but
second half.
sometimes we can do that. Sometimes it is a problem, and we've got to get a bigger fix that's a little more complicated.
And possibly what, changes of zoning or?
For access, it's usually you've got to get an agreement with the landowner that you're traveling across.
That could be very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so is that it for buyers in terms of the procedure? Because, there's a whole bunch of stuff too. I mean, so then, what's the procedure then for sellers then?
What should we finish? Just finish off the buyer thing. So assuming that we can resolve the issues, or if there are issues, I write a requisition letter to the other lawyer, and in the agreement of purchase and sale, there's a clause that has a timeline for us to do that. You submit your requisitions on time. Then it's up to the vendor's lawyer. If you've raised a valid requisition, they've got to fix it, or get title insurance that covers the fix.
So requisitions, does that mean a problem?
It could be. Okay. Some of them are standard requisitions, Gerry, like this is how I want to take title. I want to be joint tenant with my spouse, or I want to be tenant in common with somebody. There are different ways of holding title. Joint tenants, rate of survivorship.
Different types of ownership. Okay.
Yeah. Just the standard documents that you would request, undertakings, bill of sale, HST statement, that stuff. But yeah, some of the other requisitions that I was talking about, if there are issues like zoning issues, building, open building permits, access, those issues, you want to raise those in a requisition letter.
Okay. Yeah. And that goes directly to the seller's lawyer from a buying point of view.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And then assuming we get those all resolved, Gerry, then it's just, closing day is exchange documents, exchange funds, keys we used to deal with, but now I think you guys, the realtors have been handling keys with lock boxes because of COVID.
Yeah.
Sometimes if there's a mortgage.
Yeah, I was just going to ask.
Lately we've been finding that lenders are pretty burdened, overburdened and understaffed is what I hear, and it's across the board. So I just had a deal today that we didn't get the money till 4:30 from the lender.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for me to close a deal before noon these days just because of the delays.
Wow.
And if I have multiple deals in one day, it really, it's hard. And one more thing I did want to add, if you're selling and buying in the same day, that's going to be really tricky right now.
Right. Wow.
So you may want to keep that in mind.
Which is a strategy that we often use with clients. If they're selling a home and then buying another home, we often try and have it happen on the same day so that it all goes nice and smooth. Yeah. So that being said about the mortgages taking a little more time or the financing, are you seeing that demand is getting longer than a 10-day, which is a sort of an average, or can it still be done within that 10-day sort of condition period?
Right, you're talking about getting
a mortgage financing done and approved.
Approved and a commitment. Yeah, it has been taking longer than the 10 days. Yeah. I think 10 business days is what we were usually seeing before. I talked to one of the managers at one of the banks, and he was telling me that one process in that approval stage that used to take 1 day takes 8 days now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know what? That's really nice. A good way to stop now. It's interesting, but we'll take a little break because we have to go to commercial. We'll come back and we'll have more questions. All right, welcome back, and we are here again with Chris Watson, a lawyer. And this is the state of real estate. Okay, so we dealt with buyers. So what is the procedure for sellers then?
Glad you asked, Gerry.
Thank you.
Same. It starts out the same. I get
Okay.
a copy of an agreement of purchase and sale. I open a file. I get client information. Usually, I will pull a PIN at that point. So I want to see
And
what's
a PIN
registered.
is a property identification number of
Right.
the actual property that's being purchased or
Correct.
sold.
Correct.
Okay.
And so it'll tell us the legal description, the owner, and anything registered against the property. So mortgages, restrictive covenants, which are some easements. Yeah, you'll find out all those things. And then I'll write to the client, and if there's anything in there that I think is an issue, then we'll raise it in that initial letter. But I want to talk to the client about things like, don't cancel your insurance until you know that the deal's closed.
Yep.
Right? Because sometimes, we just
That'll
can't.
be our tip of the week.
Can't close it right on the date,
Yeah.
and if you let your fire insurance go, and heaven forbid something happens overnight, yeah, we're in a bad spot. So
Okay.
so don't cancel your insurance until we call you and say, hey, your deal's closed. If there's a mortgage, we'll say we need the mortgage account number because we need to write to the lender to get a discharge statement, so we know the exact amount that needs to be paid on closing to zero out
Is
the
there
mortgage.
an associated fee with a mortgage discharge aside from just like paying the mortgage off?
Not from my perspective,
But from the bank.
With a bank or a lender, yeah, they have a standard charge, which is usually $250 or $300 plus the registry office registry charge, so it's $77 and change.
And the registry office is the land registry
The
office?
land registry office, and
Okay.
everything is. They've closed the land registry offices now, so you can't physically go into any office anymore. Everything is online. Sounds good, but it does have its challenges as well.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. What is land registry then?
So it's basically a repository of anything that's related to land gets registered. If it's a notice, if it's a transfer, if it's a mortgage, application to register something, it all gets registered and it gets a number and it's assigned to a property.
So every property has a history of everything that's ever happened to it?
It should, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it should.
But maybe not?
Sometimes things get dropped and then
Right.
you need to fix it, and sometimes you need a court order to fix it, which is never good. But
Right.
yeah.
Land transfer tax.
Yes.
Who is the payer?
So that's a purchaser's tax, the land
Okay.
transfer tax. Yeah, and it's based on the purchase price. It's a funny calculation. It's 0.5% up to 55,000, then
Oh,
it's
right.
1% up to 250, and it just keeps kind of going up.
Yeah.
I have a little app on my phone actually that can calculate it. So you can download land transfer tax app,
Okay.
and you just plug in your purchase price, and it'll tell you what your tax is.
Would you happen to know ballpark, say, on a $500,000 house, what land tax would be?
I think you're going to be up around 7,000.
Okay,
yeah.
so it ain't cheap.
No,
It's
it's
not cheap.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and who passes the money back and forth? Is that you? Does the lawyer once we know everything's great and it's closed, it's closing day? Who says move the money?
So that's a purchaser's lawyer.
Okay.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
The proceeds?
Yep.
Yeah. So the purchaser's lawyer will certify a check and go to the vendor's lawyer's bank and deposit it right into their trust account or wire it to their trust account.
Okay.
Either way, and then has to provide confirmation that those funds have been wired. And if it's a certified check, the purchaser wants to get a certified check, deposit it, and send a copy of that check to the vendor's lawyer, because the vendor's lawyer wants to make sure that those are good funds, they're available right away.
And all this has to happen in a matter of hours, say after you get the notification at, say, lunchtime or AM?
There's no real, lately I've been finding I'm not getting funds till it's not before noon. So sometime in the afternoon I get funds if I'm on for the purchaser, and then I got to turn around and do all the banking.
Okay. Another one I thought of, closing costs. What
Yeah.
kind of things are in closing costs?
So there's a lawyer's fee. If I'm acting on a purchase and a mortgage, I've got to do a lot more work than a sale.
Okay.
I've got to do the title search, review the title search. There's all the documents to draft. For a mortgage, I've got to coordinate with a lender. Sometimes that's difficult, and there's a lot of work, and there's a lot of documents. So it's going to be more costly for lawyer fees on a purchase as opposed to a sale, but that's just in general. Disbursements too, because when I do a purchase, I've got the title search. Usually I order a tax certificate. I want to make sure taxes are paid up to date, because we're going to adjust for those, and we want to know that they're paid.
So you're responsible for dispersing the money to the different areas?
Yeah, so I
Okay,
pay those.
that's
That's
your
why I
job
call them
too?
disbursements. I
Yep.
pay them out, and then I've got to add them
Okay,
to the account.
okay.
Yeah. And then registry fees. So if I'm on for a purchase, I've got the registering the transfer, registering the mortgage or the charge.
Okay.
And then we talked about land transfer tax. Now, we didn't mention, actually, first-time buyers can get up to $4,000 as a rebate. So if you've never owned property before and you're buying,
excellent. That would come in quite handy. That's like, because it's a huge.
It is huge.
It's almost half in some cases.
Yeah, it used to be $2,000, and they've upped it to $4,000.
Nice.
So,
right on. Well, that's a good thing that the government's done for everyone.
There you go.
Also, with closing costs, there's such things like dumb things like if we had equal billing and electricity, or if we had oil or tanks of oil and stuff.
Right.
Who measures that, and how much is left over?
Yeah, so we usually order a final fill. So if I'm on for a vendor, I'm going to say, okay, who's your propane or fuel oil provider? Get the information, call them, find out the size of the tank and the cost per liter. Then we say, okay, the closing date is X. Can you go out and do a final fill, on or before that date, just before? Then we know that the tank is full. So if it's propane, when they fill a tank, that's actually 80% full. So we know the number of liters, that's 80% of that tank, multiplied by the fuel charge. There's a carbon tax now. So it's an adjustment. So the vendor gets a credit, right, for what it costs to put the fuel in the tank, and the purchaser's getting a full tank. There you go.
Now, what happens when things go awry after closing? So, such as that big screen TV that was in the living room ain't in the living room anymore, or a number of different things could happen.
Yeah, so things like that, Gerry, and I think things have changed during COVID. It's kind of hard to access properties now. Maybe realtors could go in and do a final walkthrough, but I always recommend a final walkthrough for a purchaser. Before we hand the money over, the vendor's incentivized to work with us. And if there's an issue like, a channel's not there, like a TV that was supposed to be left, plumbing's not working, water's not running, fridge isn't working, stove, something like that.
That's something crazy
Yeah,
happened,
so then or damage when they were moving, they scratched the floor, something was hidden behind a armoire.
Yeah, but the money's already you've already paid.
So, well, that's why we try to resolve those issues before. So do a final walkthrough and make sure that, you don't see those issues.
Which is the realtor's responsibility, really?
Well, I recommend the purchaser do it, but I just don't know if during COVID the rules and whether they're able to go into properties or if that's
we're allowed those visitations.
Yeah.
And I always recommend that the second or third visitation, if you're allowed that many, is on the day of before or of closing.
Yeah.
So
Good.
Yeah. Again, so how does that resolve itself then? Is this going to be two lawyers arguing against each other?
Well, you hope not. A lot of times, it's a matter. So if the TV wasn't there, hopefully, the vendor's lawyer says, hey, you were supposed to leave that TV. Could you put it back? If it's damage, usually an abatement of the purchase price. So get an estimate on what it would cost to fix. The vendor says, okay, I'll take $200,000, $500,000, $1,000 off the purchase price, and you can get the money. You can hire someone to fix it. You can fix it yourself. Or the vendor, if they have time, they could fix it themselves or hire a contractor that does that. And then we just make sure that it's been done. Okay.
Well, that sounds like the wrap-up of our episode. Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate it. And there's a couple of nuggets of wisdom that I'm going to pass on to the audience out there with the tip of the week, although we do it monthly, so
okay,
I still call it the tip of the week.
Thanks for having me, Gerry.
Absolutely. Great guest. Thank you. And we'll probably have to have you back because there's way more things we can talk about.
Okay.
Cheers. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Thanks.
Okay, the state of real estate tip this week is do not cancel your insurance until the deal is closed. If you are the seller of a home, you want to make sure the deal is final, firm, and all said and done at 5 o'clock on that closing day before you cancel your insurance. Because if something does go wrong and it doesn't close, the house is uninsured, should something happen in that interim of 2 or 3 days, you wouldn't have insurance and you would lose all your investments. So do not cancel your home insurance until you close. That's the tip of the week.
The State of Real Estate with your host, Gerry Lantain.